Hey, welcome back to Driver 88. So if you know, on this channel we have a lot of Porsches and Ferraris, and generally they're my favorite cars. But today we have an appreciating and seemingly rarer everyday Lamborghini Murcielago. This is definitely my vintage. It's a modern classic, and we're so lucky to be able to drive a particularly special example today. This is one of the most gobsmacking looking cars. I completely forgot how much road presence they have. So we're gonna have a look at this, look at the market at the current stage, and then take it for a drive. I'm so keen to just look at this thing. I could look at it all day, especially in this sunlight. So the Murcielago aesthetically took the world by storm in 2002. It's an iconic Lamborghini shape. This thing 4.6 or so meters long. That's like the length of an SUV today. The wheels, this color is called Antares, which suits so perfectly well in contrast to the chocolate brown leather. An incredible looking thing. There's so few of these built. Less than 100 in right-hand drive of this first-gen Murcielago, and they certainly have been appreciating enormously since 2020, of course. This one is, I think, one of the best color combinations you can buy. The iconic rear of the car with the unique taillights, and just look at the design of these wheels. The concave, the enormous 335 section tire in 2002. Incredible looking car. I can't stop looking at it. I'm not the Lamborghini guy. I'm not a big Lamborghini fan, but looking at this thing, you could stare at it all day in the sun. So the centerpiece, of course, of the Merc here is the 6.2 litre V12, 573 horsepower, 650 Newton meters. This thing trounced the 575 back then, 65 more horsepower than that Ferrari. It's just completely integral to buying one of these. If you love Lamborghinis, you love V12s. We'll listen to it now and take it for a drive. So the interior, this is something you might need to practice. It's not too bad if you slide your way in. This chocolate brown interior is just gorgeous. It fits such a beautiful contrast to the Antares paint. I never thought that they would match, but they look fantastic. I always thought Diablo interiors were a bit, you know, not the greatest of quality, but this leather feels fantastic with the stitching. We are, of course, turned inward a little bit, and this is a little bit more awkward with the right-hand drive cars. But this car is in fantastic condition. 26,000 kilometers. Steering wheel feels great. This is actually not too bad for me. I'm 180 centimeters. I have a long body, but actually, you know, my eye line is not going sort of right into the roof line. So it doesn't take a crazy amount of slouch to focus on your driving. So we have a comically small cabin, but not as bad as I thought it would be. And those dials, my goodness me. You just feel the absolute heft underneath us of that 6.2 litre V12. Beautiful design on these seats as well. And just look at that dial. 360 kilometers per hour. Maybe not, maybe 330 on a very good day in the Murcielago. Now, first things first, it is 30 degrees centigrade today here in Australia, and we need that famous Lamborghini air conditioning, as Jeremy Clarkson would say. It is like being coughed at through a straw by an asthmatic. It's actually working not too bad. Maybe that was the Diablo that had terrible air conditioning, but we're relatively comfortable. Now, the steering, of course, is incredibly heavy. You'll have to excuse me, it took a little while to find the reverse button. but I got there. Very heavy steering, as I said. The E-gear takes a little while to get into neutral. Please may we have first. Okay, we're in first. You know, one of the reasons why this would be so satisfying to drive is the incredibly heavy steering. And I'm taking this so slowly. So back in 2002, another figure that was quite remarkable, 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. That is a quick car even today. That is no slouch. And the visibility is not too bad out front, but good luck in the back. Of course, I'm not looking straight forward, but it's making me incredibly cautious driving this thing. There's a really nice progression of power, and I can't particularly show you too much fast driving in this thing because we live in the wonderful communist state of Victoria. So the E-gear, of course, is a bit of an elephant in the room. It's not smooth. You have to take your time with it. And of course, the manuals are the sought after car, but it's very satisfying because you have to think about what gear you're in, and you sort of have to take your time. It just adds to the experience. Of course, not all old automated manuals are like that, but this doesn't particularly take our crappy roads too well, but it's an experience to drive, no doubt, and it's experience to drive. Finding the nose of this car is also pretty comical. It's hilarious to see the needle at 60 kilometers per hour, basically taking up 10% of the whole dial. But this car rolling on the road, it's almost like, it's just as exciting to watch it rolling on the road, as you'll see now, as to driving it. It just stops the show. .650 newton meters, and peak torque comes in at relatively high RPM, as you could imagine. The brake pedal feels a little bit spongy. It's not giving me a ton of confidence. And the visibility out the rear is not terrible through these slats of the engine cover. What a car though. What a car. We have such a weird pedal setup. I'm struggling to get my head around it, but I think it's just something that you would get used to. You have to kind of drive this car in a slouch position. I mean, we need an Autobahn, don't we? We need the Autostrada where you can sit at 160 and the police will not be concerned whatsoever about what you're doing. Speed is very, very, very perceptive, indecipherable in this car. You think that you're going like maybe 60 kilometers per hour, and you're actually going a lot faster. Okay, so now that I've had a little bit of time to drive the car properly off camera, I can say this. The Murcielago needs space. It needs speed to make sense. Preferably the Autobahn or the Autostrada. This car comes alive at over 100 kilometers per hour. All of a sudden, everything makes sense. The steering feels so much better. The stability, of course, you hear the V12 engine at a proper amount of revs at high speeds, and the gearbox is then a lot happier at higher speeds. Here in Australia though, I would honestly recommend even trying, if you buy one, take it on a track day, take it to somewhere like Phillip Island where you've got lots of space and lots of speed, take the corners slow, but at least then you can wind the car out and experience what you've actually paid for. If you're looking to get a Mercy, please don't just leave it on the main street to be looked at, even though they look so fantastic. So let's look at the Mercy market today. Now, part of the reason why they've shot up in value so much since 2020 is due to this man, at least partly. It's Ed Bollian from VinWiki, and he has tracked every single VIN number of every single Murcielago and 640 ever produced, of which case there were under 2,000 made Mercies in that time, and just 81 of them were coupes in right-hand drive like we drove. And of course, all that interest, particularly of course in manual models, has really pushed up the values a fair bit. Not only that, but I recently watched an Iced Coffee podcast recently where Doug DeMuro, the man, was also saying that he thinks that they will continue to be rising in the near future in value. Now here, at least just on car sales in our Australian market, there are just 4 cars for sale, and the average price after taxes is $540,000. Now that is a fair bit brought down by one of those models being a higher kilometre modified version, but basically good examples are going for the sort of high 500-ish asking price. Now of course you'll be paying about 10% more for just the one manual Mercy I could find, and that's an import from Singapore. Kilometres do have a fair amount of effect on the price. Speaking of prices though, all the way back in 2004, the retail price was $682,000 before options. So these V12 Lamborghinis have always been incredibly expensive, and if we slap that price into the inflation calculator, you'll get a price of $1.13 million, which is pretty much what the retail price is of a Revuelto before options. So they've always been expensive and they continue to be. Now, speaking of those prices, that means that the E-Gear versions at least have dropped 20.8% on average, but again, that average is before options and pulled down a bit by that lower priced car. Now, the E-Gear clutch replacement is a bit of an issue for some people for good reason. So to replace the clutch on this car, it is an engine out job, which also on a 20-plus-year-old car means you're probably going to be fixing a number of other things as well. The only numbers I could find was 11,000 USD on a forum in 2016. So I could imagine here in Australia, you're up for at least 25 grand to pull the engine out and put a new clutch in and E-gear on, then all the extra things you probably want to replace when you're pulling that engine out as well. If you've got a quote for that, please put that in the description or in the comments rather, for us to see. What has been getting a lot of attention recently is the tiny amount of manual roadsters in the 640 or the Mercy. And those are pretty much getting, well, whatever people want to pay, deep into the 7 figures for perfect examples. And that's really been making some spotlight news on the Mercies and generally pushing everything up behind it. So the Murcielago, for a guy that's not a Lambo guy at all, I am quite converted. The looks, the sound, just the whole experience as a whole. It's just not a scalpel sharp supercar, but it is something that I think every Lambo collector would want in their collection just to even look at every day. This is Driver 88 and we'll see you next time.